Hey, Jesse.
Hey, John. How's it going?
Just catching up with all the stuff that's changed.
Yeah. Enjoying your mock Friday?
Yeah. It is Mock Friday, isn't it? Well, I'm on primary for real Friday, so keep my fingers crossed that'll be quiet.
Should we get started?
Yep.
As a reminder, make sure you put your name on the doc associated with this meeting. I thought I saw Emily hop in here. Did she drop? There she is.
I just always assume Emily has internet problems. So
I mean, she does live in this alter reality dimension thing based on her background.
do we have any new faces? Going to the participants list, I don't think we do. Do you want to kick us off with cache types, Javier?
Oh, yes. Cool.
So you can tell Ben he's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's wrong, right? I think he put the comment of different audiences, and I agree with that completely. I think if we think about it that way, we could kind of like separate both issues and think about each one of them, hopefully solving potentially some of the same problems, but in very different mindsets. Whereas one is more geared towards, you know, the hacker that just wants to do whatever, and then another one that wants things to just work, right? And I'm tailoring the people that just want it to work, and that's kind of where this RFC comes in. And let me share my screen real quick. Once I could find the right thing to share. All right, so this is still a draft because I'm putting the pieces together that I think are necessary to have like a more thorough discussion. But at a high level, what going back to, you know, wanting to just work from a user's perspective is this like use case of, let's say, a Java app developer where he builds one Java app. Then when building the secondary Java app, they are not expecting the Maven dependencies that they just downloaded for app A to then have to be downloaded again for app B, right? And again, speaking to kind of the alternative, which is like just mount your M2 anywhere and it'll just work. I think that that's great, but the experience itself is not the ideal one, in my opinion, right? And so what I would want is to have a way that Pack in itself as a platform, and other platforms could take advantage for different purposes or maybe the same reasoning, is for them to be able to have that information, to be able to then share this cached information across both of these applications with some level of safety, right? And in one of our previous meetings, we talked about like, we kind of drilled down and said that it is really the build pack that knows whether or not this sort of information should be shared across multiple applications. And in that effect, the proposed solution here is to specify or allow a build pack author to specify what type of cache it is, right? To then enable this. And maybe the most explicit way to represent this is to just look at the spec changes proposed here, where all it really is from an app build pack author's perspective is having this additional, maybe potentially even optional field where it's now cache type. And apparently I have some bad formatting here. I'll have to fix that. But it's this cache type where they can now specify app specific or build pack specific. I think the names could be, you know, improved, but the gist is that if it's app specific, then you can't reuse that cache with another app. Whereas if it's Buildpack specific, you can, right? That's kind of what it's trying to intend there. Any initial concerns or questions?
Maybe by build pack specific, we really mean sort of like global or shared. Because when I see build pack specific, I think like you're going to have a cache per build pack. You don't really know what build packs you're running until you make it through detect. And I think managing a cache per build pack is sort of complex for platforms, but instead it's just a shared cache that can be shared among many apps. And then the layers we pull out of it will depend on what build packs detect, just like we do today.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying as far as it maybe being too specific or tied to the, I guess the use case, right? The platform use case, maybe even. But I think I wanted to leave it at this layer, like maybe more in like common terms. And that was the only one I could think of. Whereas global to me seems like maybe more ambiguous.
Maybe just shared then, because the platform can sort of decide who that's shared among, but it just means that it's not scoped to a particular app.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like shared.
Yeah, I think it's important because you like M2 would be, Pivotals or Picato's build packs versus Heroku's, and like if they were both doing it in a similar way, I think shared would be great to be able to support between the two.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we're ever, like when we rehydrate cache layers, it's only if that layer was created by a build pack that detected, right? So if you switch from one build pack to another, I'm not sure if we would have any way of knowing that those layers are really something you'd want to restore, because they could be managing their metadata differently and you can get weird behavior.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot more sense. For me, as a, from the platform's perspective, we were going to, I think I talked about it here, we were going to separate it based on, what happened to it? Did I get rid of a section by accident? I'll have to look through it. Oh, here. Yeah, no, it's there. Platform implementation, right? So pack, we were going to do it per builder. And we were doing that as kind of like safety mechanism in a way to like segment off at least the potential concerns and not contaminate stuff across builders. But Emily, I think to your point, it actually even makes more sense that it's essentially per build pack almost inherently.
I was going to say that it should just be one for pack, just one shared cache, unless someone is giving it a name and then therefore managing multiples, because we're never going to restore a layer that wasn't created by a build pack that's going to participate in the build. So if you had like two builders, that are mostly identical, but one of them has a couple extra build packs, I don't think you'd want a totally separate cache for that. And the fact that we would only restore layers for participating build packs means you do have some safety anyways.
Do we have a different concern about potential size of the cache, or is that already something that we would have otherwise?
I think whether you split it across multiple caches, you put it all in one, this method of doing things does create the problem that we don't know when to clean things up. I'm not sure that any way you slice it, you solve that problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
But we have that problem today, right? Building multiple images, you have the same M2 potentially in two different cache layers.
Yeah, you get duplication right now, which uses up size, but the one thing we can do when it's per app is at the end of a build, if we haven't used something, we clean it up, right? So it doesn't grow forever. And this, because it's shared, at the end of a build, you wouldn't know that just because something wasn't used meant no one would use it, so we wouldn't be able to clean things up.
Yeah, I think the hope with maybe sharding was that we could figure out a mechanism, but what you're saying is definitely bringing to light some things that should be noted, I guess. I don't know that it's inherently bad, right? Because ultimately there could be other mechanisms to essentially garbage collect, which I think we've been trying or thinking about already adding some tooling around identifying volumes and clearing specific volumes for different purposes. And so I think that would help here as well.
Yeah, it doesn't worry me particularly that it would grow forever.
So it is possible, right? And it does solve the problem, it sounds like. Are there any other concerns? Sorry.
I think this is a good idea and we should do it. I don't know if I think that this replaces what was in the other proposal though.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, right? Like after going back and forth with the ideas, I agree, right? And going back to my initial statement, I think it's just the different desires where one of them is, you know, like that faceted Swiss Army knife, right? Where you could do pretty much anything. And then another one is, hey, you don't have to know about this Army knife. It just magically works.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Would you want the Swiss Army knife to be a non-experimental feature, Javier?
No, I honestly like, I don't like that being something that anybody could just get access to without at least first starting as experimental. And then we see like, hey, there's very specific use cases and nobody has really shot off their foot, right? But otherwise, it just seems really scary, especially on the Linux system, right? I'd
I
be
wonder
curious. Sorry,
if there's
I was
some way to
gonna
just
call out
make
for
it.
you.
Sorry.
No, I want to hear your thoughts. Like I was going to call out for you and your opinions on that being experimental or not.
Definitely should start experimental. I think that makes sense. I want to like see if we can find ways to provide functionality like that to people while making it very clear that it is unsafe, so that we don't have an overly paternalistic UX that stops people from who know what they want to do from doing things that are useful to them, but also doesn't encourage people who haven't thought it through to do it. Like even build it into the flag name, like -- unsafe volume or something like that, you know?
-- do not use -- volume.
Yeah.
Got it.
-- I am Ben.
Or like anyone who knows why they want it, right? Just a way, somewhere in between encouraging people to do things that are unsafe, which I don't think anyone wants. But then I think sometimes we default too far to preventing things from happening that would be useful to people.
Would it be safe to say though as well that we should recognize that if we go too far in one direction, like the whole volume mounting just anywhere, that we would potentially put aside, you know, some bigger concerns or maybe UX features that we would otherwise implement for the simple fact that, hey, this works, but you have to run this command and you have to know how this build pack works, right? Like I feel like we could fall into that, oh yeah, that's nice to have, but we're not really going to work on it because we have a workaround and it's like these couple -- volume flags that you could attach to your build command.
I think that's always the risk. And the onus is kind of on us a little bit, right? Like to make that happen. I think where there's probably a lot more impact is probably the noise level of hearing the pain from customers. Like if there is a workaround, a customer or a user is less likely to potentially complain about it. The trade-off or flip side that you get out of that though is that potentially people will walk away less you know, talking about like Ben's concerns from, was it the leadership meeting? I forget, but some meeting yesterday where we were talking with Ben and, you know, basically like with CA certs, right? Like, is a thing I need to do and I can't. So I think that's kind of the trade-off of balances that we're trying to strike there, is like, we want to enable people, but also carve out time, but for us to do the correct or right thing that eventually we want to get to, even if we don't know what that looks like today. And so I think it's about trying to figure out how to walk that line and enable our users to continue to be productive.
The funny thing with the volume situation is that it actually provides a workaround for the CA cert thing. Like you could just mount in a cert bundle to the cert path, and you would have, if we did that, you'd have a workaround for certs at build time.
Is that what you told Ben? It's like, if you get this feature, you can.
No. I feel like the volume thing is mostly Ben's baby, but I agree with him on it, right?
I guess my stance on it is I don't disagree with the use case. I probably disagree that that's the thing we want to champion or pilot. And it feels like a failing to some degree that we haven't done something better. But I also recognize that I don't think something to fix it will be implemented anytime soon. So it's about striking that balance of not preventing people from doing real things on our set of, I guess, tools and platforms. Is kind of where I sit on that. And I think even with the experimental flag, like, I think it's okay to have a crappier Linux experience initially if it's not experimental, I guess. Like I guess if we shipped a thing that wasn't experimental, I would expect it to be held to a higher standard.
Yeah, same. And then the other part too, that I guess maybe I have concerns about the volume mounting, is that that's only a pack feature, right? Like it doesn't solve, like from what I heard during our last conversation, is that this RFC here can then be used by other platforms for, you know, either very similar things or something maybe slightly different, right? Whereas the pack mount your volume everywhere still kind of, yes, enables the app developer, but at the same time doesn't necessarily solve it for anybody else outside of pack. And so then I feel like we're adding more niceties or pack specific features where then we want to use pack pretty much everywhere instead of relying on Buildpacks as the individual components in other systems potentially.
Well, my hope is folks like the KPAC team and the Heroku team and even like the Google, Microsoft, or whoever else, the Docker people, push back on if this is a thing that should be something that is more broadly used or have better primitives for a feature like that, that they come to the table and say like, that's great that Pack does this, but this is a thing that I think should be available to all platform providers or some mechanism there.
Also, things flow the other direction. Like KPAC does have an interface for adding CA certs. It's just a KPAC specific interface, right? And I think if there was a platform provided one, everyone would like to standardize. But we can also look in platforms beyond PAC for as people solve problems and see if any of it wants to like get upstreamed.
Yeah, that's the path we're taking for some of the local dev stuff, kind of on our side, on the Salesforce Evergreen stuff. We're definitely playing around with a thing because it feels too early to write an RFC for it, even if we all agree on what the motivations are for wanting that feature. What it actually looks like in practice still leaves a lot to be fleshed out before you could spec something out.
Cool. So circling back to this, I have a big to-do item on the lifecycle implementation side of things, only because I haven't had the time to dig into it. Emily, do you have some guidance on what you see this change potentially, or how this change would potentially work within the life cycle, and what things would be necessary to change there?
Picture it. It's another flag to everything that takes a cache, like a shared cache flag. And then we sort of just do what we do now, but we put it in one cache or the other, depending on whether it's shared or not. I think
So we have
might
to
be
launch.
quite straightforward, actually.
Yeah, so we just propagate the notion of separating the different cache types all the way up from to the platform API.
Yeah, so then a platform could provide like, here's my shared cache, here's my app cache, and then the lifecycle can just put things in one bucket or the other, depending on what it wants to do.
So it's been a while since I looked at the details. So right now there are 2 flags, or technically 3. There's the layer cache, there's the cache dir and cache image.
This is
Does
the
the cache?
launch cache.
Yeah. What did
Not
I
the
say?
layer cache. Layer cache.
Oh, yeah. Launch
Yeah.
cache. Sorry. Mhm.
I think this would be analogous to like the cache dir and the cache image, which would be like shared cache dir, shared cache image. I think the launch cache is a totally separate beast. It's just a daemon performance hack, and we don't need to think about it in this context.
Okay. Cool. All right. I think with that, unless anybody has any more questions, I'll yield the floor to the next item.
I was wondering for the TOML thing. I mean, this is break and change stuff, so maybe it's a bad idea in that sense, but it just seems like having the Boolean plus the type, like if this only happens if it's true, it seems like you potentially could roll that into one thing. But again, that's a break and change.
That was my
so maybe
initial
suboptimal.
intention. Well, I mean, I think no matter what, it would be well, I guess I'll let Emily speak to that part, but I mean, the API is changing, right? Because the TOML file changes. But my intention was to go that direction, but I couldn't figure out a name for no cache, right? Like cache false as a string value. Is it off? Is it no? Or is it stop?
I think
In a
all those
world
are
where breaking changes weren't a thing, I feel like cache could be a
yeah.
table, and then you could have true, false, and type, I guess. I don't know. I'm okay with the 2 flags, honestly. Like cache type is just ignored if cache is false. That doesn't really bother me.
I guess it's just I tend to be bothered by things that are triggered by something else because it can be. It's like this field is really useless if this value is set to something else, right? And by default, it's I guess false. And there's really no world where it exists where it just seems like a type of cache is basically to have no cache, and it would simplify the API in probably a positive way.
So would it be possible to have, if we wanted to go in that direction, have cache be a string, but if it's empty in itself, it represents no cache or don't cache?
Potentially. Yeah, I mean, it gets, I guess it's a little tricky there. You could also just set it to, I guess, be a set of enums, right, that are strings. Like it is false or off or whatever you want it to be. And that's the default.
I guess I like true and false being different from the cache type because I'm thinking about edge cases like, let's say you don't actually give the lifecycle a second cache, a shared cache. Like, I think we should put that layer in the app cache. It's like, you don't think we should not cache it in that case? So I think of cache true false as being still meaningful. Like, I don't think there's like 3 separate options. There's, do I want to cache it? Yes, no. And then there's the, could I cache it in a shared place if it's available?
Isn't that just like, that's what, in this case, Buildpack specific means? Or your shared one? or whatever you want to call it. Like it means cache it in the shared one if available, if not cache in the app. Like that's just what that type means. Like if you set cache to true and cache type to Buildpack specific, that's that functionality, right? If the shared cache is not provided, it would still cache in the app versus not cache at all.
I mean, yeah, you could implement it either way. It's just
Um,
about like how I mentally model it.
Yeah, I guess to me, like the cache equals true seems redundant even in that case, right? Or false.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it, but
I think I would leave it open to better proposals or suggestions, but yeah, because I don't have a solution in mind either. And then Emily, I think from an implementation side of things on the lifecycle, you're saying that shared is if available. I'm wondering, I
yeah,
haven't
I think
thought it
that's
through.
right. Because I think some platforms like just may not want to have shared caches, and they shouldn't have to provide 2 app-specific caches just to make the functionality work. That's sort of how I feel about it.
Yeah, could be for like security reasons or something, right? Like you don't want to share stuff.
And then we would put it into the app specific one, which at that level, it doesn't necessarily detail it to be app specific. I think the app specific name might actually not be the appropriate name here, but
I guess this also brings up like, I guess this would probably be a platform concern, but potentially you'd only want to do like the shared cache in like a organization or some other construct. So
Is even like a project scope. You almost want like a scope of some sort that you can define, because in some cases you might have the same repo in which you build like 8 images using the platform, and in that
yeah,
case you know it's safe to use between all those builds, but you wouldn't want it to kind of go outside the scope of that, and so you want it to sort of be like a platform toggle of some sort, I think.
but I think that's like when you implement lifecycle, the fact that you can pass in directory means that like if you're using if this is a new project or a new org, you would pass in a different kind of cache there that is specific to that one. That
Yeah, I
can
feel
get
like
shared.
what the right scope is going to be contextual to the platform, but the lifecycle can just have to sort into bucket A or bucket B, and then the platform can decide how it manages who gets access to each of those.
yeah, that was another term I was potentially going to use here is scope, right? And so it'd be like cache scope and then app and build pack. So naming is hard apparently.
I'm open to most names, but I don't like Buildpack.
Yeah, agreed. You've swayed me away from that one for sure.
Okay.
But then scope shared, I guess that still makes sense. And then the platform decides what shared scope means to them. Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely make those changes. All right. We can move on to the next one. This one's more or less because I was curious how we felt and maybe a refresher on what it means, but it has to do with TTY and no color. I feel like this discussion has come up a couple times, and I'm not sure that we've logged anywhere exactly where we stand on TTY, because there might be like a false promise that something's coming. I haven't seen anybody actually do anything about it.
Let's do it. Pack should run the lifecycle in a TTY.
Is
That's where I
that
stand.
okay? That's your mark. Okay,
I'm
so
gonna put that flag in the sand. And then I think on the lifecycle and build pack level, they can make their sort of default coloring depend on whether it's in the TTY or not. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't also have an explicit no color flag.
What does this mean for other platforms outside of Pack, like Tecton or GitHub Actions?
I feel like that's one of the compelling reasons to do it, because then you should kind of just get the experience you want depending on the platform you're running in. So platforms that can provide the nice output will run the lifecycle in a TTY and they will get it, and ones that can't won't, and they won't necessarily have to toggle it on or off. It will just happen. I feel like it's most compelling when you think about the tools that Buildpacks orchestrate. So a lot of those can print really pretty output if they're running in a TTY, and that output would be really hideous in a world that doesn't display it correctly. So because we don't right now, you sort of don't have an option to get some of those pretty output from tools that Buildpacks invoke.
And we're going further than color, right? We're talking about progress bars or something. I guess, what are more concrete examples?
Yeah, progress bars are a big
these?
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I wondered how that was going to look if Pack starts doing TTY. Is that going to look better? Because today I think it gets like just kind of ignored. Like I think in some cases we actually do like term equals dumb, so that npm doesn't do a progress bar because it looks not as expected. It looks like it hangs because you're not getting the output you expect.
I think if we ran in a TTY, and we'd probably have to strip off any like phase prefixes. I think we did that already though when we brought in creator, right? You could get nice progress bars from tools that Buildpacks orchestrate in the TTY case.
I know in Pack we have the timestamp flag. I'm assuming that might also get affected in a TTY scenario where we'd have to kind of reallocate or reposition potentially.
Yep. Yeah, that's why we actually did term dumb in one of our things, is because we had a timestamp and it was getting wiped out by random build packs.
Yeah, and I think Pack should only run the lifecycle in a TTY if Pack itself is running in a TTY, but it should just pass that through if it's true.
So really, I think it goes beyond saying that, hey, we should turn TTY, right? It's like we want to, maybe the real ask is we should support TTY, and that entails more than just turning it on, right? It entails turning it on and addressing anything that might come out of it.
Yeah, turn it on, and then make
See
sure it doesn't look like garbage, and then ship it.
Is this, I guess, an API of sorts? Is this a platform API and Buildpack API change? I know we probably don't talk about that in the current language or current spec.
I don't think it's an API change because we don't make any prescriptions about whether the container should or shouldn't be run with a TTY. And we might change our defaulting color behavior, but that's also not a specified thing. That's just our decoration of the output.
So if we wanted to go in this direction, what are the next steps? I guess, where do we start? Is it really Pack the one that has to, initiate it, or is it lifecycle? Or is it the build packs themselves?
I think that's a good question. I think once Pack turns it on, then everyone else can adjust to take advantage of it to make things look better. I don't think there's like a downside. Turning it on in Pack doesn't hurt the lifecycle or the build packs. Right. And then once it's available, then they can modulate their output accordingly.
So we could turn it on, but then we would need to figure out a way so we could create our own life cycle version and build pack that both try to take advantage of it and do different things with it in order for us to be able to detect and determine what the issues may be that come out of it, right? Otherwise, again, going back to we could just turn it on, but then things get screwy. Once everybody else starts enabling it, I think it might not be as useful.
I think some of the stuff build packs do, like when they're invoking tools, like if I don't actually know exactly what Maven does in these situations, but let's say my Java build pack is invoking Maven and there's a case for a print a progress bar. Maven is already going to do that or not do that based on whether they're turning it at TTY. So as soon as you turn it on, you might see your build pack outputs change without requiring the build packs to change anything about what they're doing. Like lots of tools already detect whether it's a TTY and behave accordingly.
So it's really just a pack and lifecycle change initially.
Yeah, I think Paketo build packs then would like to turn color on and off based on whether they're in a TTY or not, but they need to have that option because right now it's always on because it's never in a TTY.
Cool, that makes sense. I could definitely put some backing behind that and at least do a quick spike to figure out exactly what happens there.
You make Ben very happy. And you can win some points for arguing about the cache stuff.
Yeah. I could just hold it ransom, right? I could give you this, but you got to give up this other one. Yeah, I'm just kidding, of course. Cool. Oh, and then I guess no color. Did you reply to whether or not that's an API change?
Yeah, I've been thinking about stuff like this a lot lately because I think there's some things we really don't want to specify in the platform API, but platforms still want to know whether they don't want to break it by trying to use a flag that doesn't exist. And my suggestion is for things that aren't in the platform API, even if we provide a flag, because we always provide both, platforms like Pack should just use the environment variable. So then you don't really need to know whether it's supported or not. You can just set it and hope for the best. And I think for all the types of things that are unspecified, there are always toggling, like inconsequential options, like different things in the output. They're never the sort of thing that you couldn't just fire off and hope for the best.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think I feel comfortable with that. And in some sense, the flag is still useful for people, for maybe, let's say, platforms that have a very specific life cycle, right? They're using our very specific life cycle, so they could take advantage of the flag and not have to worry about anything else. But for Pack or anybody that uses, builders that could come out of anywhere, that would be different. Cool. That answers my question. All right, anything else? Any other questions?
I didn't have anything. Should we give people 15 minutes back?
Sounds good.
Yeah, so Greenhouse will be here next Thursday to talk about how to use Buildpacks. So maybe we can shame Ben into actually showing up.
Awesome. Thank you all.
See you guys.
See ya.
Hey there.